So tonight I thought it about time that the Pravartaks-preps, those who are not yet even Pravartaks, and some of whom may not be sure you even want to be Pravartaks, especially after this retreat, should at least know more about what you're getting into. And so I want to talk to you tonight about the vows that we take as disciples of Sat Yoga, in case anyone ever wanted to go that far on this path. Sat Yoga is a spiritual order, and it does have a hierarchy, as any community must. It must be organized in such a way that different people are responsible for different tasks, and the entire organization functions smoothly, and that requires people willing and able to take responsibility in an ongoing way to accomplish certain things and make sure that they are done correctly. So we need a hierarchy that is A, legitimate, and B, that is truly functional, not dysfunctional, as most families and societies are, and C, that it is based on the principles of Sat Yoga, which are that of love and wisdom and self-empowerment. And emphasizing the wisdom, we call our organization a Sophiocracy, based on the principle of Sophia, the goddess of wisdom and divine love. And so we are Sufis in that sense. But that is our principle, that those who govern the Sat Yoga order should be those who have proven to be most reliable, most responsible, most virtuous, most mature, most generous, and most able to express in their lives and their actions, as well as in their words, the truths and the feeling state of union with God, so that we see living role models who are avatars of Sat. And thus we have a process in which we gradually teach ourselves to transform the ego, to mold it, to refine it, to become someone who is worthy of being emulated and followed, and to take the counsel of. That worthiness is something that is not taught in our modern educational system. We're taught to read and write, and then to grab as much as we can and make as much money, and if you have to cheat to get it, you do it. But there isn't really any nobility or virtue taught any longer in our society. In fact, quite the opposite. For the first time in history, we're living in an antisocial society. You're literally trained to be antisocial, to not care about the society, but to care only for number one. And number one is not God, it's the ego. So it's a totally egocentric society. We are creating an egoless community that totally blows the minds of everyone who has had a Western style of education and training. And it's very difficult to grasp that this is what our intention is, and this is what we're making real. But unless we do this, then we are just another power structure. And we don't want to be that. But this will go against the grain of everything you've been taught and everything that your own ego wants to hold on to, including its own pseudo-autonomy and power and domination and all of those chakra 3 jouissances that we study here. And so to become one who is in the governing councils of Sat Yoga, one must be willing to surrender the desire to dominate and to be bossy and to be egocentric and narcissistic. And that is why, in order for that to work, we have to have a social contract where we all make an agreement together to become that. Now, not every student who comes to Sat Yoga is interested in that at all. So we don't impose this at the threshold when somebody comes in at the door. That's what they used to do in classical schools of yoga, and still do in India in some schools that retain the old traditions of Patanjali, in the true sense, not just in name. But we do insist upon someone living according to the ancient yogic vows, and our vows are no different than those that yogis have been taking for the last at least 4,000 years, probably longer, in order to create communities and ashrams that then later got passed over into Christianity, because to create a monastery, you need to have basically the same kind of structure. And that's true with every spiritual tradition, whether it's an official ashram or not. If it's a madrasa in the Islamic tradition, the same thing follows. And the reason is, nobody wants to live in a community where everyone else hasn't taken those vows. But nobody wants to live in a community where they have to take those vows. This is the ego's problem. A guy doesn't want any other guy to hit on his girlfriend, but he wants to be able to do that. Doesn't want to give up that right. This is the way it is with the ego. It wants to be able to break the rules and to not have to do what he wants everyone else to do. And here we recognize we can't have a community unless we all agree to abide by the vows. And I have to go first, whether or not anyone else is doing it. It's not that, I see that person there isn't doing it, so I'm not going to do it. No, you can't have a community unless you have people willing to go first and take those vows, even though it makes them seem more vulnerable then. You know how they say nice guys finish last? Well, that's not true in Sat Yoga, but the ego will feel that. That, hey, I don't see everybody else here as being purely loving. Why should I be purely loving, right? And yet, that is the way to get ahead in Sat Yoga. And it's also the way to get closer to God. And it's the only way to achieve salvation of your soul. But it's also the only way we can create a sustainable community, is if we have the courage to go first. And so, we do insist at some point that if you want to be an official disciple, that you not only agree in lip service to keep these vows, that you'll see are just common sense. There's nothing out of the ordinary in these. But that you have a track record of having been able to do it. And that the community trusts you because you have shown this in your own actions, that you're trustworthy. And everyone needs to do that to be accepted as a disciple. Now, you don't have to be a disciple to be in the Sat Yoga community, okay? You've all been in this community for a long time. We don't really have any official disciples yet. So we don't insist on that. To be at the urban center or to be here on retreat. But if you wish to be a permanent member of this ashram or its eco-village annex, then we insist that you be a disciple in good faith. Okay? And it's only right, and it is only that which is good for you, for your own soul. Because it's just a matter of psychic hygiene. And we can't really live together unless we are hygienic in our relationships with others, and transparent and open, and without ulterior motives, and without all of the lower chakra intentions that the ego has. Now, the real problem, of course, is that you can take these vows and you can honestly mean that you want to keep them, but your censor is crossing its fingers behind your back and has no intention of keeping them. This is the problem. Because the censor, of course, is run by fear and by the feeling that it has to be in control, and it will not surrender, it will not love, it will not give itself without making sure there's a quid pro quo. etc., etc. We all know that, and that's why our community, unlike a number of others, has a process of one-to-one work, of sessions, of processing, and of dealing openly with these issues in classes, so that we come to terms with all of this, and our conscience will sting us if we fail to live up to the vows that we have taken. And that's important. That's the kind of healthy shame that enables one to then refine the ego and ultimately transcend it. But it's very difficult to change one's sanskaras. This is appreciated by everyone, and I think all of us share the knowledge of how hard it is to change any tendency that one has had in life for any length of time. They are not ingrained in the true sense, because they are decisions that one makes. But the level at which the decision was made at becomes repressed, and the level you now decide to live differently on is different from that level. And so these two levels exist, and they create a state of inner conflict. So the conscious level has to meet the unconscious, and these two have to be integrated so that one can really redecide from that initial state of consciousness in which the decision was made to close down and to armor oneself and not to love, to open one's heart again or for the first time in one's life. But all of these vows are really there to help you open your heart. That's their purpose. And not to fear love, either receiving it or giving it. And sometimes people fear receiving it a lot more than giving it. So it's all about that, but it is also about becoming mature and responsible and mindful and consistent so other people can depend on you, so that if you are given responsibilities for something that needs to happen in the ashram, we know you're going to carry that through and not say, oh, I'm out of here, I'm taking a vacation and I'll see you in a month, and then what happens? We can't have people who are in positions of responsibility in the community who then flake out. So we have to know that you're really serious about being here and giving it your all, because we can't have a community unless we have people who are really willing to give their all to the community. If you have one foot out, then you can't be depended on, because when things get tough, you're going to split. So we need people who are committed to really be here, especially when times get tough. And if we don't have that kind of pioneer spirit and commitment, then the community will not make it when it really hits the fan, and it will. So I'm hoping that you will consider these vows. Nobody is requesting or demanding that you ever take them. But if you want to be here as a committed member of the community and consider this your home, you're all welcome to do so. This can be your spiritual home for the rest of your life. We hope that you will choose that. But we want to make sure that it is a home that will be functional and truly loving, unlike most of our original family homes, and that love will continue on through time, and that you will be able to carry the torch into the future of this community, that it won't depend on any particular person being here, that you will agree to become pillars of the community who are role models and who are the living examples of what we're teaching. And that's what we're encouraging. We want everyone here to be a leader, not a follower, and not a passive receiver of what the teachings are or what the activities are, but to be a true leader, spiritual leader and teacher and guide for others. Because in the future, thousands of people are going to come here looking for guidance and seeking salvation for their souls. And we have to be in a condition to be able to offer that. And these vows are just the very minimum threshold of taking that decision to be a true yogi. Okay? So these vows are not something that I came up with, and they're not something recent. They are the traditional yamas and niyamas, which are the observances of what you should do and what you shouldn't do, basically. And, of course, there is a lot more detail than just the headlines of what the vow says. Because when we get into the actual psychological implications and consequences of taking a vow like this, and what is its impact on your daily life and how you relate to others, then it really becomes interesting as to whether you can fulfill this vow, all of these vows. To take them in a truly deep, subtle, spiritual way as they are intended will require a total transformation of your being. They are not something you can say, oh yeah, I'll do that, no problem. And you're kidding yourself if you think it is like that. That's why I say, consider very carefully before you even decide whether you want to do this. Because then you have created something you must live up to. Not as a superego expectation that then you'll feel guilty for. No, because we already know that everyone who takes these vows will fall, will break them many times. And then the key is simply learning from the mistake and brushing yourself off and getting up again. But it enables you to maintain the aspiration and the navigation of your path through life. This is a community of forgiveness. It's not just of law, it's of love. But it is the law that protects the love that is offered in this community. And the love is the heart of the community. So all of this is about creating structures that enable us to feel safe in loving and in opening our hearts and being vulnerable to one another. Okay? Any questions about any of that so far?